So you just bought a mioXL and you want to get up and running as quickly as possible. In this video, I want to connect the mioXL to my computer to show you what the default MIDI routings are so that you can get started with this as quickly as possible and maybe even use this without even connecting to a computer. So let's dive in and get started. Now to start off with, I am going to connect this to my computer to show you the default MIDI routings, but I'm going to have a separate video where we talk about some cool things you can do with your mioXL when you're not connected to a computer. Okay, for this, first thing again, I'm going to mention I'm connected USB DAW, this port to my computer. The other end of this is going to my computer. I am going to download and install, or I've actually downloaded and installed Oracle for X Series, which is the free control and configuration software from iConnectivity. This is going to allow you to configure and control all your audio and MIDI interfaces from iConnectivity, and it's very simple and easy to use. All we're really going to use this for today, we're not going to change any settings, is we just want to look at the default routing so that when you get this straight out of the box, you understand if you plug in here, is it going to do anything or not? So the best way to do this is to go to Oracle for X Series, and I want to go to the MIDI routing tab. Now, this is made up of two really simple parts, sources and destinations. Sources is things sending MIDI, destinations are things receiving MIDI. So let's start by default. Let's say we plug something into DIN 1 on our interface. Where does that go? Let's look at it here, then I'll actually show you physically on the interface. So just by default, if I plug something into DIN 1 on my interface, it's going to go to the DIN 1 port on my computer. What does that mean? Now let's look at our actual physical connection here. So on the back of this, let's see if we can turn this around without disconnecting power. Here is DIN 1. If I plug into this, then that means that the DIN 1 port on USB DAW, which is what shows up in your DAW, is the default routing, okay? So let me just show you really quickly. I'll show you in the context of Ableton Live, but this would work in any DAW. If I go into Ableton Live's MIDI preferences and go to in, you can see I have DIN 1 all the way through to DIN 8. Those are pre-selected and ready to go in my DAW. So I bet if we go back to Oracle for X Series, if we go DIN 1 all the way to DIN 8, yep, you'll see the default routing for those is DIN 1 through 8 in our DAW. So what that means is if you want to plug a keyboard into DIN 3 port on your mioXL and you want to use that in your DAW straight out of the box without doing anything, then open your recording software and look for whatever DIN port you did. If you plug into DIN port 3, it's going to show up as DIN port 3 on your computer. If you plug into DIN port 7, it's going to show up as DIN port 7 on your computer, okay? So those are our DIN ports. Now, let's talk about these USB ports and what those do, okay? And this is maybe a little beyond the scope of this video, but we have these 10 different host ports that we can connect to. When we actually look on our physical device here, these are these USB connections here, okay? So let's look at those. You can see those listed here. Now, what are the default routings for these? And then I'll talk about one important thing if you're going to use USB, again, straight out of the box. We do have to configure one setting to get going with USB, but here's kind of default routing. Is if I look at this, let's go to USB hosted device instrument. Let's go to host 1 in this case. And let's look, it says device port to computer DAW, host 1 through 7 are pre-mapped. So what that means is if I plug in a USB MIDI controller, okay, so here's a USB MIDI controller here, and I plug this into my iConnectivity interface, and I've plugged nothing else into this ever before, right? This is just starting from scratch, plugging this in. By default, this is going to go to host port 1, and then that's going to show up in my DAW as host port 1. So if I wanted to use that, go to DAW, look for end and in, MIDI in there, and you see host 1. You can see host 1 through 7 are our defaults there. Now, let me show you one other thing. Again, I said this is maybe outside the scope of this video, but you're smart, you can follow along. If I added additional MIDI controllers to my interface, it's really important to go into USB host port reservation and reserve those host ports so that the interface knows exactly what I'm using. So host port 1, I want to reserve that for this device here, and that establishes that connection. If I plugged in other USB devices, I want to make sure that I reserve those host ports for those, okay? And again, as a reminder, when you open this in your DAW, host 1 through 7 is already pre-mapped and ready for you to go. You just need to plug it into your mioXL and you need to reserve the host port to say, okay, this one's host 3, this is host 2, 4 through 7, okay? Okay, so now let's talk about outputs, right? So if I am in Ableton Live, if I'm in my DAW and I want to route MIDI from my DAW to my mioXL, here's the default routings for that. So if I go to the device port to computer DAW section and choose DIN 1, DIN 1 through DIN 8, when I select that, are going to automatically come out of DIN 1 through DIN 8 on my device. So let's show you physically on the device what I'm talking about here. If I choose and route out of Ableton to DIN 8 output, it's going to come out of there by default. Again, I don't have to do any additional MIDI routing. That's just selected in Ableton and we're good to go. Now let's take a look at, again, in this case, I'm using Ableton. Let's see what our other default routings are. We have host 1 through 7, okay? Host 1 through 7, again, is going to go, if I say, let's choose host 1, where's that going to go? It's going to go to the host 1 device that's connected to our computer, to our mioXL. In this case, this is my interface. I connected to this USB port. I reserved it to be host 1. So again, if I go into Ableton and say, hey, route this to host 1, guess where it's going to go? It's going to go to host 1. Now, additionally included with default routings, this is definitely outside of the scope of the video, is this really cool preset selector option that allows you to send program changes from your DAW over that USB DAW connection to your mioXL to change presets on your mioXL from your DAW. Now, again, that's outside of the scope of this video, so I'm not going to go into that now. But if you're looking to get it up and running with your mioXL as quickly as possible, plug it in, just start plugging things in and see how it gets to your DAW. And you'll be surprised and shocked at how quickly you can get up and running without really having to do any work. Now, if you have any questions outside of this, something I didn't cover in this video, click the link in the description of this video to reach out to iConnectivity support. You can either submit a support ticket or, even better yet, check out the articles, the tutorials we already have to see if we've already answered your question. And if not, reach out to the support team. They'll be more than happy to help. Thanks so much for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.